we have left then, I believe, this matter of East Cleveland, correct? That's the next matter. And I know many of you were here in that regard, regarding this matter. And it is a discussion to schedule, whether to schedule a recall elections for East Cleveland council members, Bloshak, Gowdy, and Stevenson. I just want to kind of set this up where we're at. We received materials from Willa Hemmons, who is represented to our staff that she's now clerk of council at East Cleveland. And therefore, and that they've certified that there's sufficient signatures for the recall of these three individuals that I talked about. And that therefore asking this board to schedule a date to place these recall on the ballot. And so that's what we're going to discuss here. I know we've asked, Ms. Hemmons has provided reasoning and rationale how she came about to be the clerk. I think it's been publicly circulated. Her rationale and reasoning is that she had, I believe, Mr. Martin, a member of council, appoint her because the other members, the council clerk had been fired ostensibly by the president of council. No clerk had been appointed. Therefore, Ms. Hemmons' logic in her letter, and I want to get this right, Mr. Musson, if I understand, is that because the three individuals who were the subject of the recall, she's determined they can't vote for a clerk. Therefore, there was only one person left. That was Mr. Martin. Mr. Martin had the authority to appoint her. She is therefore appointed, and therefore she is just bringing these down as required to as a clerk, and therefore we need to put on the ballot. I think I've asked you, Mr. Musson, to look into this matter because I'm not so certain the logic that Ms. Hemmons has shared with me and us, this board stance as regards to her position as a clerk of council. I know there are people that want to talk about this here, and we're going to hear from you too. But let's first hear from, Ms. Hemmons is here, and I know she put in, and there's others that, why don't you come speak to it? We'll get to you, Mr. Musson, in a minute, okay?
Good morning, council. How are you?
Good morning, Ms. Hemmons. Could you speak to the matter of how you've determined that you are now the clerk of council in this case?
I think that's somewhat a misunderstanding. What I submitted to the board for its consideration was a case called the Thompson case that you have before you that said that the clerk does the ministerial duties. I also submitted to you legal opinions from 2021 and 2023, which showed a pattern of disenfranchising the clerk of council anytime there was the possibility of a recall, particularly that was targeting the council president. So therefore, in light of the Thompson case, and indeed the more recent case of Stevenson versus the council president, in which it too corroborates and sets a precedent that the clerk of council position is merely ministerial. And I also included an East Cleveland Municipal Code. I think there's also corollary state law that indicates that the spirit and intent in order to effectuate the purpose is what is important. And if someone continuously perverts that intent or spirit, then one is allowed, a board, an agency, the public is allowed to seek remedies in order to preclude that perversion to take effect. And that's what is done, not that I'm the clerk of council. Indeed, there is no clerk of council. I know this isn't a matter of your concern, but no legitimate legislation has been passed since January 3rd, the day that the council president was sworn in. And also section 102 of the charter says a clerk of council shall be appointed.
So, excuse me, Ms. Hemmons, you got to the point, and the point is, you just pointed out, there is no clerk of council. You made that statement, and the
Yes.
code, the charter requires the clerk of council to certify the petitions.
Right.
And then to notify the recall targets of their sufficiency, and then at that point, ask the board, bring them down. So if there is no clerk, what authority do we have to accept those petitions and to place this on the ballot?
What I'm saying is, I have this moment. I have the original petitions here, and you have, of course, copies of them, which was accepted by the director. We stayed here for several days, certifying the signatures. And so what we're asking is that the will of the people not be thwarted because of the contrariness and the obstruction of the council president to avoid the effectuation of the charter.
So in other words, your position is that they haven't appointed a clerk, because if they did, then that clerk would be down here asking for the recall, or, certifying and asking us to set on the ballot,
And
correct?
I'm just really.
I'm asking you that, right?
Yes.
So isn't your remedy going to, I believe it would be a mandamus, Mark, or, what would the remedy be to get
Well-
the clerk, president of council to appoint a clerk? What would
Well,
that be?
see-
Let me just hear from Mr. Tomas.
Since they have the duty to appoint the clerk, it would be an order from the court for them to fulfill their duty, which would be a mandate.
Mandamus action, and that could be brought by any interested
I
party,
think a petitioner,
a
yeah.
petitioner or somebody. Okay, go ahead, Ms. Hemmings.
Well, I think that as an agency that has a mission to effectuate the will of the people in terms of sending us to a judge at this point, after we already have had the petitions accepted for certification, is a little bit belated, because if that had been communicated to us from the get-go, then we would have done that. But instead, we have lost valuable time and a lot of effort by the residents and citizens of the city of East Cleveland, which took on 3 or a month ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
But may I interrupt you 1 second? I mean, I grew up in East Cleveland and still have family in East Cleveland. My concern here is, everybody comes to this board and expects us to have jurisdiction over the activities of the municipality. You guys have to figure out, it's incumbent upon you guys to know what your charter and your codified ordinances say. Not for us to be, come to us later and say, well, we have to assume that you have followed your own charter and your own codified ordinances. So when someone comes to us, and that we have to find out in the paper half the time that you haven't followed your own procedure, I'm really concerned. I mean, I don't want to ever thwart the will of the voters, but the voters need to be relying on you guys to follow your own charter. It seems to me you can't stand there and say that the position of clerk is ministerial. The acts of the clerk might be ministerial, but the actual position, your own documents, your own organizing documents say have to be appointed by president and council. I don't understand. I appreciate your advocacy, but I think we even got a different opinion from you in a prior case where you said that it didn't have to be a clerk. What was maybe Mark can enlighten us. We got an opinion on this. And I'm just frustrated. I mean, all these people sitting here, I respect every single voter that's here. I know there may be different opinions on what position they're taking about this, but everybody comes and expects the Board of Elections to fix what is the problem in the municipality. Not only East Cleveland, other people come here and they're like, you must not thwart the will of the people. And my response is, you must follow your own documents. This doesn't make any sense. So that's my concern, that you guys have not followed your own charter and your codified ordinances in terms of appointing a clerk. And you guys know if there's a clerk or not. How are we supposed to know who's the clerk and who's not? You have a duty, and file a mandamus action and compel the appointment of the clerk.
At this
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Okay, at this point, knowing that the clerk, the president of council willfully, intentionally, and maliciously did not appoint a clerk in order to avoid that, at this point, my position, the city's position is that you're being, by not accepting, well, you already accepted the petitions. My certification was accepted.
Well, I could make the argument that you
Arbitrated.
that you brought them here knowing that there was no clerk. I don't want to get into malicious and intent and all that. I'm not casting aspersions on anybody, and I don't want to besmirch anybody's reputation or integrity. But, you know, just as you're saying, they knowingly didn't do this, that, and you knowingly brought petitions here.
And you're knowingly complicit in her unlawful activity.
How are we-
Okay, Ms.
That's
Hammonds, Ms.
ridiculous.
Hammonds.
This is the most
Wait,
ridiculous.
I have a
Ms.
question.
Ms. Sticken, go ahead.
Okay.
When was the clerk terminated?
The clerk was terminated January 3rd.
Okay, having my past life as a council president, I know sometimes it does take time to find a clerk. I don't know if there's a process in place or not, so it's a little over a month here we're talking. So I don't know where we're at with that
Well,
process.
she also fired the deputy clerk. And then when I began
Right,
acting
but then
in the
it's,
position of a clerk, excuse me, let me finish. When I began acting in the position of the clerk, then that's what she fired me. Then she fired the assistant.
wait a minute. You just said you weren't here as the clerk though, when you began your comments, and now you're
Yes,
saying you
okay,
are.
so she tried to
Well-
fire everyone who was processing these certifications. So therefore, by your acceptance of these certifications, because we.
Well,
spent down
actually,
here
Ms.
for-
Hammond, I wasn't done with my questions.
Mhm.
You're
Oh,
going
I'm
off, you're not letting me ask them.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
one, you began by saying you were not the clerk, and then you confused me because you said you were fired as the clerk, so I was
No,
confused by
but
that.
fired as the law director.
Okay, but that is within the powers of the president of council, from what I saw with respect to terminating the clerk. That does appear, and that is part of this process. This council president started in January. I guess this is sort of a tighter timeframe is what I'm talking about. This hasn't been 6 months, it's been a little over a month. So I guess I'm curious as to that process to fill this role. The second thing is, it's my understanding when people bring petitions here, a lot of times we look for the signature verifications and those kind of things. And a lot of these issues which we're discussing do occur after the petitions have been accepted, because that's when these issues are raised to us. So to say you accepted these petitions, therefore you're bound by them, has never been the case, because some of these legal issues are things that we do need to discuss here.
Ms. Simmons, let me just make that point very clear that Ms. Sticken made. If your argument is by accepting the petitions, you have to put it on the ballot, that's not correct, because then we're making a decision prior to even having a discussion. That's why it's a discussion now. We've got them submitted to us.
Yes.
Now we're deciding whether or not we have the authority to place this on the ballot. As simply as that. Just by filing them doesn't say, you're gonna put it on the ballot, okay?
Okay.
So you understand that?
Yes,
Right.
President Hastings, may I back up a
Please.
moment with your comments? The certification, another case was brought to my attention, a previous case. This case has been litigated up to Kazoo. So it was said that the certification should be done by the position. You're relying on a person, and we're relying on the Thompson case as well as the Stevenson case, in which the ministerial duties of a clerk of council is not dependent upon any particular person. Further, and let me conclude by saying, by your acceptance of the certification, you had me, the board, the representative of the board, had me certify these positions. So at this point, really, it's not a mandamus action. This between me and you, and I'm seeking a declaratory judgment.
Thank you. All right, thank you. Mr. Coleman, I'm gonna, there's some people that want to comment on this. You can have 3 minutes if you'd like to, Mr. Coleman. We do have some paperwork you submitted to us.
Today?
Yeah.
Well, I want to hear both sides, but go ahead, Mr. Coleman. We've got your paperwork.
I missed this.
This isn't, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't public comment period, okay? That's the 5 minutes. This is not a protest hearing either. It's simply a discussion among board members and with the benefit of your input. So I'm going to limit it to 3 minutes at this point, okay? But Mr. Coleman, please, we do have your paperwork that you submitted to us previously. Be heard, sir. Could you please state your name and address?
Okay, good morning, Lee Coleman, 1615 Forest Hills Boulevard, East Cleveland, Ohio.
Please, be heard.
Okay, so, yeah, we've had constant infighting between the mayor and the administration in the city of East Cleveland. After the last recall election of the mayor, we thought that the issue had been resolved, and both the administrator and the our city council was going to work together. Nothing could have been further from the truth. There's been constant fighting between the council has refused to pay vendors, refused to approve union contract and complete the necessary approval so our city could continue to receive county, state, and federal funding, some of which is in jeopardy right now as we speak. As the residents, we had enough. We decided on December 21st to make a change. On that day, 3 residents completed notarized statements and affidavits and requested recall petitions on councilwomen Gowdy, Stevenson, and Blahoviak. Then the obstruction ensued. On December 27th, Councilwoman Corinne Stevenson went into the council offices after hours and unplugged the computers and the cameras. As a result, Ms. Peters couldn't work. Our council clerk at the time could not prepare any agendas or any other council items for the for the January 3rd meeting. On December 29th, Councilor Stevenson penned a termination letter, signed it as president of council and dated it for 12/29/22, terminating the employment of Ms. Peters, and Ms. Udidra Peters received that curry letter at noon on January 3rd. Discharging her as clerk of court for the city of East Cleveland. You've had those exhibits from. On December 30th, then Council President Nathaniel Martin appointed Mark McLean as interim counselor for Ward 3 as prescribed by the city charter. On January 3rd, during the council meeting that night, Corinne Stevens was elected president of city council. After the meeting, she fired the deputy clerk and deputy clerk, Ms. Parker. On the 4th, Nathaniel Martin appointed the law director, Willie Hemmings, as clerk pro tem in the absence of a clerk, so the recall petition could be submitted. On the 17th of January, at that next council meeting, the council attempted to unseat Councilor Nathaniel Martin in retaliation for his appointment of Ms. Hemmings as the clerk. On the 20th of January, after working through the holidays, rain, sleet, and snow, the residents turned in 1,500 signatures to the acting clerk, Ms. Willie Hemmings. Nobody else was available for us to turn them into. January 30th, January 30th, the council attempted to vacate the law director, Ms. Hemmings, and the assistant law director in retaliation for the law director's filing and certifying those petitions. All this for us as the residents here from East Cleveland, this represents a pattern of obstruction. It's continued up until this day. And all the exhibits in the timeline that we share with you show a deliberate and continued attempt to undermine that process and outlined in the East Cleveland City Charter. Now Councilors Blahoviak, Gowdy, and Stevenson are asking this Board of Elections to do that which they cannot do by obstruction. They're asking you to silence the people's voice and yet again throw out the recall petition that were duly sworn, legally circulated, and signed in good faith by the East Cleveland residents.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman.
Just a quick question on the timeline, because on the written document, I don't see a January 17th entry that you referenced. What was the January 7th? You mentioned something.
On January 17th, I think that was we have council meetings on the 1st and the 3rd Tuesday of the month. At that.
Well, what happened? In your narrative, you said certain things happened on January.
In retaliation for Councilor Nathaniel Martin making Ms. Hemmings the clerk pro tem, they attempted to remove him from council.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Mr. Anderson.
We're just asking that you get him on the week.
We understand that your position, you would like us to set a date.
Yes.
Right.
Thank
Thank you. Mr. Anderson. Okay, you have 3 minutes, sir. Go
I'll be
on. State your name and your address, please.
Justin Anderson, 1865 Roslyn Avenue, East Cleveland, Ohio, 44112. Good morning, board members. Good morning, board members, and congratulations on your retirement.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
your retirement. I've been in front of you quite a few times. Sometimes you ruled in the favor of what I was coming for, sometimes you didn't, but I've always respected your opinion.
Thank you.
Never doubted it, actually. Actually, I learned it. So I'll be brief. I'll talk about a few things, and I'm not gonna get too much into personal feelings about the council members and things like that. I just wanna focus on like the, what's her name, Ms. Campbell?
Chappelle.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Like she stated, we have to look at the laws and ordinances of the charter of East Cleveland. Not what we feel like doing. So section 49 and 50, that's where it talks about you must have a council clerk to do this process. And it mentions the council clerk at least 10, 15 times. It doesn't say law director, it doesn't say volunteer, it says council clerk. It doesn't say clerk pro tem or whatever she tried to reference. So that's a big issue that she inserted herself as the clerk. I mean, 1 minute she's the clerk, 1 minute she's the law director, 1 minute she's a contractor, 1 minute she's representing someone privately. So we got an ethical issue we need to handle within the East Cleveland government, with Ms. Hemmons. And once again, it sounds like she's going to be suing, trying to sue the Board of Elections. And she's already done it a few times, and she's lost. Every time that she tried, she's lost. And because of the brilliant attorneys here, I'm sure she'll lose again. But anyway, let's see. Chapter 113, Rule 8 of the Charter, just for the record, for you all to know this, it says that the law director cannot give out any legal opinions unless she gets 3/5 of the council to vote. So when she sends her legal opinions to you, it's in violation of the city charter. I cite laws. I don't just get up here and talk about all that gibberish. But 113, chapter 113, rule 8 of the charter, it says she cannot give out legal opinions. So when she bombards you with these legal opinions, I hope that someone can reference the charter to her that she's violating. Also, the final thing I'll say, when it comes to people not getting paid, contractors and all that stuff, like she said before, that stuff needs to be handled within East Cleveland government. And I find it interesting that a contractor feel, oh, I'm not getting paid, so let me go get recall petitions. There's also revised codes dealing with retaliation amongst elected officials. Because you're not getting paid, you want to gather recall petitions. Doesn't make any sense. So thank you, board, for allowing me the opportunity to speak, and you have a nice day.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson.
I have a
Yes.
question. Do we have the document, the purported document where Ms. Hemmons was appointed? I haven't seen, I didn't see that unless I overlooked it. Do we have the document that Ms. Hemmons referenced and then someone else referenced? Presumably the action from the 17th. Did I miss that?
That's an affidavit she
Well,
provided.
there's an affidavit, but we don't have.
And here's, I think, an opinion she issued.
I saw her opinion. Yeah, I see.
And
No,
this-
I see that. Yeah, I saw this stuff, but okay.
Thank you, Ms. Wojciak. Thank you, Brett. You have-
I know what she's saying.
Please, you have 3 minutes. Please state your name and your address.
Patricia Bohoviac, Counselor at Water Treatment, East Cleveland, 1894 Farmington Road, East Cleveland, 44112. There's so many problems with this presentation by the so-called law director that it's hard to decide where to start. One place is with the letters that she sent us saying that there were recall petitions, identifying me as the counselor for Ward 2, Counselor Gowdy at Ward 4, and Counselor Stevenson at large. All of those letters were in error. Willa Hemmons was never the law director of East Cleveland. According to our charter, the law director must be appointed by the mayor and approved by council. She was never brought before council, so she was never the law director. Her salary was zeroed out in the unanimous vote of the council in January. Her position was deemed vacant by council. That was a 4 out of 4 vote. There was 1 person absent. Still, the mayor's office allows her to act as if she were law director. That's the mayor and the police. She still runs the law department. I requested copies of the petitions from the city, and they refused. Basically, they said that I requested that they be sent by email. They sent me a response saying that I needed to pay to come and get paper copies. I did get email copies from the Board of Elections, which has always been very cooperative. However, they were not fully legible. So here we go back to the competence of the so-called law director. For one thing, as Mr. Anderson stated, she is to treat all her opinions as confidential unless there's a vote of 3/5 or more of council. Therefore, she should not be sending you opinions at all because there's never been approval of that by council. Another issue, of course, is that she was supposedly appointed as clerk of council by Councilor Martin. Councilor Martin is not a majority of council. Each petition is a separate petition. When you approve putting a recall on the ballot, you do not approve putting all 3 of us on. You approve 1 person if the petitions are acceptable. If the next set of petitions are acceptable, you approve the next one, and then you approve the next one. So in each case, 1 person is not the appropriate decision maker for appointing anybody or anything.
Thank you, Ms. Blochiak, for your comments.
Can't get through the rest of them.
We're gonna have to run a meeting here, so we know where you stand. I guess you're opposed to setting a date, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevenson. Please state your name and address.
My name
Good
is
morning.
Lynn Stevenson. I reside at 15006 Grandview Terrace Road in East Cleveland, Ohio, 44112. I'm here today because of what is going on in the city, pretty much, that has been brought here. And I don't think this is the place for it. The charter of the city of East Cleveland addresses almost any and everything that you could ever wish for, want for, or need. If you review that charter, you would know that. Willa Hemmons stood up here and said that she's the law director. Willa Hemmons is fired. Willa Hemmons has been fired. The clerk of council was fired. The assistant clerk of council was fired. There were cameras planted in the council office. Illegal wiretapping was going on. So the majority of these people are going to be removed. You don't have the right to do the things that are being done. We need to follow the charter, ladies and gentlemen. That's why our forefathers wrote it. And they didn't write it so that the city would be bankrupt. They wrote it so that the city would forever flourish. If you read the charter, you would know that. I am embarrassed to continue to come down here before you guys with this nonsense. And I appreciate what you do every time you come. And I just want to thank you for what you do. But what is going on is illegal. And we have to fight through the illegalities of it to get to the end. And that is what we intend to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jones. Please state your name and address and please be heard.
Yes. Good morning,
Morning.
council and audience. I am an East Cleveland resident originating from Cleveland, Ohio. I came to East Cleveland in 2005. I am totally embarrassed. And the last meeting, and I just recently started going, shame on me. But this council needs help at every turn, every turn. And I have no legal background, but every turn that something or an idea is attempted to move forward, this council obstructs it at every corner. All I can say is, if there's any way that you all can intervene, guide, consult, or help, please look into what is going on. If you just look at some of the videos, unprofessional handling, Robert's Rule of Order, they don't even know what it is. So I implore you, please help us navigate this. Three, and I hate to say it, women are banding together to get in the way of any advancement of our community. I think it's sad to the point that I had to bring popcorn for the circus at our last meeting. Because that's what it is, it's a circus. I don't know why, I don't know what the political motivations are, but it is crazy. That's all I have to say, it's crazy. So I'm asking you all, please, do what you can. I know that someone said that we are expecting you to intervene. We're just asking for your help. We're just asking for your guidance. This is pretty sad. And I ask you to look at some of the videos of how these women are handling me. Thank you. Shirley
Thank you,
Johnson.
Ms. Jones. Mr.
For one second, just if I may, Mr. Chair, I just want to make sure, oh, no, thank you for your
Okay.
comments, appreciate them. I understand that there's a lot going on in East Cleveland. I just want to get clarification. Our decision and our analysis here today is really focused on one issue. And that's whether there was and please correct me if I'm wrong, whether there was a clerk who could assemble, a clerk duly appointed pursuant to the governing of legislation of East Cleveland that could assemble, certify, and deliver the petitions to us at the time that they were delivered. Is that the sole issue that we are looking at?
That's how I understand the question being presented. The charter requires the clerk to certify that the targets of the recall failed to resign after certifying the petitions. And the question for the board is whether to accept Ms. Hammond's certification of that fact.
Right. So to me, the facts and people want to come up, and I understand they want to vet and understand and tell us about all the ongoings and the differences of opinion at council and East Cleveland. But we need to seem to me to be informed for this discussion and to figure out how we are to act, whether to put them on the ballot or not. We need to know, was there a clerk
Yes.
or was there not a clerk? Duly appointed, but I'm just trying to have the comments. We have limited time to hear from people. If the comments could focus on those issues, it seems to me that would just be more helpful to us to understand
Thank
what
you.
our role is here
And
today.
also how one council member can appoint the clerk. That's my other question in my mind. This
Right.
is like one member did.
That seems to be the authority that Ms. Hemmings is claiming
Right.
to act as the clerk, is the appointment of a single council person.
One
that's not
person.
Council
Yeah.
president.
Right.
So we're going to continue to hear from you, but that Ms. Chappelle is correct. That's the focus of this, is whether there's a clerk validly appointed at council. I speak for myself and not for the other board members. I don't care, I take no position on whether someone should be recalled or not. I mean, that isn't any concern of mine. I'm sure my board members, whether we have the legal authority to make that, whether the clerk was actually appointed.
Right, whether the conditions precedent for placement on the recall has occurred. which
Has
is the
occurred.
clerk
It's a
notifying-
condition precedent,
Correct.
right? It's as simple as that. And to your point, I'm not interested in knowing that meetings are conducted appropriately, allegedly, or this and that. But anyways, we'll continue on with the 3 minutes of comment. Mr. Fambro, if you'd like to speak, sir. Please state your name and address, sir.
To the board. My name is William Fambro. I'm an East Cleveland resident. I have been for about 16 years now.
Great.
Okay. I heard that Will Hemmons was appointed to some kind of managerial clerk of council. Our charter does not allow for a position that is paid in salary called ministerial or whatever clerk of council. That is not a position in East Cleveland. The person who is claiming to be a law director, Willa Hemmons, actually has a contract where she is the attorney of the mayor, period. She puts legislation into form so that the council can vote on it. Other than that, she is simply the mayor's lawyer. That's what she is. And she parades around being called law director when that's convenient. Other than that, she's just the lawyer of the mayor. And I can prove that. I was in a court case where a city magistrate at the Court of Common Pleas took her and removed her from representing the mayor, the police chief, who is now indicted, and Michael Smith. The question was she the law director? And that magistrate determined that she was not the law director of East Cleveland, that East Cleveland has no law director, and she was ordered to remove herself from the defendant's table to go to the back of the courtroom where the audience sits. So these are things that you need to know. So I thank you for your time, for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Fambro, for your time. Thank you. And Ms. Jay Gatson, I'm not certain. Yeah, sure. Can we continue? Okay. Ms. Shay Gatson? Jay, please. State your name and address, please.
Yes, hi, Jack Addison, 1862 Farmington Road, East Cleveland, Ohio, 44112. Good morning, board. Thank you for your time. First, I would like to say that I think that this discussion is kind of veered off of its intended purpose, which is to discuss placing these counselors on the recall ballot, not discussing whether or not Willa Hemmons is legally the law director of East Cleveland. Second of all, I just wanted to give some clarification for Ms. Chappelle. So on December 30th, Nathaniel Martin, who was the then council president, so it was in his legal right to do, he appointed Mark McLean as the Ward 3 council person. When we talk about the charter and whether or not there was a clerk, fact. We pulled recall petitions with then council clerk Tracy Peters. Fact. After the council people who were being recalled were made aware of this, they fired the council clerk as well as the deputy clerk. Fact. Council President Nathaniel Martin, within his right as council president, then appointed Willa Hemmons as pro temp clerk because no one could find it. They could not fill the vacancy to submit the recall petitions. Fact. After Willa submitted the petitions, then it was a nonstop harassment and just smear campaign against her to prevent and obstruct the submission of the petitions to the Board of Elections. We, the residents, have followed the charter as prescribed in the charter. I believe you all have a copy of our city charter, and so you can read for yourself. Legally and lawfully, we circulated petitions, we submitted them, we followed the procedure to the letter. It was beyond our control that they kept firing law clerks. Fact, council president or now council president Korea Stevens, she appointed Mansell Baker as the pro temp secretary, who is basically fulfilling all of the roles of a council clerk, including preparing minutes, preparing council agendas. So he could actually have submitted the petitions, but because he is not technically named the clerk, He does not have to. And so basically, our city is being held hostage by technicality. And so I just ask the board to please keep in mind that this hearing is not about Willa Hemmings. This hearing is about the will of the people, the fact that we are trying to make a stand. We're trying to bring some type of consistency and stability to the city. And we just ask that you please respect our charter, respect our will, and rule in our favor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Katz. Ms. Holmes, I can't, there's a name.
Actually, can I note for the record, though, in the affidavit submitted by Nathaniel Martin, he does indicate that this appointment of Will Hemmings occurred when he was a council member, not as council president. So I just want to make sure the record's clear on that.
There's
It's
a-
his own affidavit, it is January 4th.
Thank you. Well, there's a Barbara Clomes. I can't read the last name just as ineligible. So Barbara filed. Okay, you on Carolyn Road? Okay, would you like to be heard? Okay, you have to come up here, please. Okay, please state your name and address.
Barbara J. Thomas, 1165 Carlton Road, East Cleveland, 44112. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Madison. I am up here as a former councilwoman for 17 years in the city of East Cleveland. I have lived in East Cleveland 50+ years. Ward 2 was my ward that I represented. I'm a proud resident of East Cleveland. And it disturbs me that we have all this confusion. It should not be on a personal level. We're supposed to be up here determining whether or not these petitions, these individuals would be getting on the ballot. Next, East Cleveland, no one has said it, is a home rule city. They do their own governing. You appoint the officials to take care of the business in the city of East Cleveland. Apparently that is not being taken care of. I don't want to hear who did what, and who sneaked in here. This is not a personal issue. It is a public issue, a legal issue, which is up here to be determined by this board if these individuals will go on the ballot. Petitions were gathered. Legally, they were determined by the Board of Elections that they were in order. All the petition names on there were checked and validated by the Board of Elections. They were accepted. Basically, there is a charter, and I'm assuming that from what is being said out here, that this board has the charter. But in all of that being said, all the residents that's coming in here to deal and look and see what's happening should know their own charter. We are, as residents, have the opportunity to deal with our business when it's not being dealt according to the law in the charter. Apparently, that has been done by taking action and fulfilling petition. Bring them down here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Nathaniel Martin. After Mr. Martin, we're going to hear from Ms. Gowan. I'm cutting off any further public comment. We'll have listen to over 12 people speak on these
Thank you for
matters.
your patience. It's an honor to be here.
Please state your name and address.
My
sir.
name is Nathaniel Martin, 1839 Bearsville Road, East Cleveland. Basically, it's a very basic situation here as far as I'm concerned. It's about the petitions, it's about these going on the ballot. Here's where it is. Because the charter says that the clerk has to take them down, and we have no clerk, then what do? Sit on them? Do nothing? Something has to be done. Someone had to bring them down. Someone, over 1,500 stickers were signed. Someone had to bring them down. So we got out, the work was done, people got out here, the people signed these petitions. All they're asking is that they go on the ballot to make a decision on the 3 people involved, Rehoboth, Gowdy, and Stevenson. So the charter doesn't cover everything like any situation. But the issue is putting this on the ballot, and the people have spoken. I've spoken. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Thank you. Ms. Gowdy. This will be our last public presentation. Go ahead, Ms. Gowdy. Please state your name and address.
My name is Councilwoman Juanita Gowdy. My address is 1857 Johnson, East Cleveland, Ohio, 44112. I'm here today because of Willie Hemmings had decided to put me in a position where I didn't have no other choice but to come down here to clear my name. Willie Hemmings is a private law director of Brandon King and a former mayor, Gary Norton. She take personal side, she's biased, she don't work with the council, and she have not been appointed by the council at all. It take 3 votes to vote Willie Hemmings in if we wanted her to be the city law director. She carried the title to blow everybody's mind thinking that she is our law director, which she's not. I had experienced Willie Hemmings in action. I had a campaign as running for mayor, and when it was time for Willie Hemmings to demonstrate that she was the law director of East Cleveland, she couldn't do it. So the magistrate, as Fambro was saying, told her to take a seat in the back. She could not come in and represent nobody. She's been doing this for the longest, breaking the rules of the charter. Ever since East Cleveland had her as a contractor lawyer for the mayors, she's been breaking the charter. She broke the charter by allowing the mayor giving out $300 for signing petitions. The mayor is breaking the law too. He's got to come before council to pass out any money. $3,000, they bribing the city. They know that our city don't have money, so anybody will sign up for $300 and sign a petition. I had got phone calls on that. Many phone calls that they buy the election. That's what the mayor did for the mayor election, and he's doing it for this. He's giving people $300. Now Shay Gaddison.
Please be quiet in the audience.
Shay Gaddison is the one that forged her signature on a recall petition that trying to throw me up about it, and she ended up. Y'all ended up throwing the petition out, and I thank you for that. The charter said it takes 3 votes for the council to pass, and we passed it. We passed.
Thank you, Ms. Gowdy, for your comments.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, all right, please ask everybody to be quiet. Please be quiet. If you want to talk, go out in the hallway, you can go out of the building, please. We have a matter to be considered here. Mr. Musson is our legal counsel. Mr. Musson, you have taken a look at this at our request, the board's request, correct? And we as a board have an independent duty to get, while we can talk to law directors and cities, we can still talk to our own legal counsel, correct?
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Chairman.
And we've done that. So you've taken a look at this. What's your guidance to this board?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's 3 petitions up for review, and under the revised code, the board has the authority to review petitions. The charter requires the clerk of council to issue, verify the signatures, and certify the sufficiency of the petitions. Ms. Hemmons has certified those petitions and has fulfilled those duties, claiming the authority of the clerk. Under the charter, though, the clerk is appointed by council. Under the codified ordinances, the president of council has the authority to appoint the clerk. Ms. Hemmons claims that she was appointed clerk by Mr. Martin, who was not the council president at the time of the appointment. There's no authority under the charter for one single council person other than the president of council of the ordinances to appoint a clerk of council. So the conditions precedent on placing the question on the ballot does not seem to have occurred. And this board would need that condition to be fulfilled to move forward in the election.
That condition precedent being a duly appointed clerk.
Correct.
And there is it fair to say that there was no other authority when you've taken a look at that charter effectuating a further delegation to the appointing authority or provisions of others to act as clerk? In other words, Mr. Martin was here and saying, we don't have any clerk. You need to do this for us because we sign these petitions.
Right.
But that's correct. There is no other way other than this mandamus actually talked about, right?
Correct. The council has the duty to appoint the clerk.
Right.
And even in the pro tem, there is the authority to appoint an employee of the legislature to serve as the pro tem clerk, but that's the council as a body, not a single member.
But there is a remedy, which would be filing a mandamus action against the president of council to appoint a clerk. And then a judge would rule whether they have to do that or not.
Correct. The charter says that the council shall appoint a clerk, and there's a duty to do that.
All right, I'm going to just make a motion. I want to know, I know there are going to be more questions or discussion on this, but I will move not to certify, set a date. I will move not to set a date for these recall petitions in East Cleveland for some of the reasons we discussed here. If there's a second. Okay, now there are other questions from our board members here in regards to this matter.
Yeah, I'm hearing that people say, I just want to make sure, I think board member Sticken had pointed out that Mr. Martin's comments were very passionate. You know, the people have spoken. The people also speak through council. They speak by voting for and electing their representatives. And so we would expect, as a board, at least I would expect council as the spokespeople for the people and residents of East Cleveland to take the action they need to take as well. So I just, Mr. Martin, to Lisa Sticken's point, he doesn't indicate that he's the counselor at large. And I think the point was he's just one council member. I don't think that your affidavit, David, where you admit that you were nothing in here says you were the council president. And it just seems to me the condition precedent has not been satisfied, that the authority for the clerk, there was no clerk and there was no appropriate appointing authority. I'm not persuaded by Ms. Hammond's argument since she was the appointed authority. I don't think that you had the authority, Mr. Martin, to make that appointment. And for that reason, I'll have to support the motion. At some point, we need folks to follow the charter and be deliberate in doing that. And if we have, by whatever action we take here, don't give you the remedy that you feel you need, you have other recourse to pursue that.
Thank you, Ms. Chappelle. Any other question or comment from the board members? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor of the motion, aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion passes unanimously. Thank you, this matter is concluded here. And I'll give you, and I know some people may be leaving in that regard. I know that we put an agenda item on here for Ms. Wojciak regarding petitions, but that matter is moot in light of this board's decision that we're not to schedule a hearing. So I'm going to just remove that from the agenda item.